Hello, this is Darrell Castle with today's Castle Report. We'll be talking about the resignation of Joe Kent as Director of the National Counterterrorism Center, especially about the ramifications of the letter he publicly released explaining his resignation. Yes, Joe is gone, and I, for one, will miss him in government because he was not afraid to ask questions and to encourage legitimate investigations into things which didn't make sense from the official government explanation. First, let's take a look at who Joe is and how he became Director of Counterterrorism. He was born April 11th, 1980, so next month he will be 46 years old. He enlisted in the U.S. Army right after 9/11. He made it through Ranger School. That's no small thing, folks, where he served with the 75th Rangers. He requested Special Forces, where he spent his 20-year Army career. He served 11 combat tours in the Middle East wars. In 2018, he left the Army and he became a paramilitary operative for the CIA. He was married to Shannon. They had 2 children. She was also a military officer and a Navy cryptologist. And in 2019, while serving in Syria with her husband and 2 children back home in America, she was killed by a suicide bomber. If the loss of Shannon was as devastating for him as it would have been for me, it's easy to see why he left military service and tried to enter politics. He ran for the U.S. Congress in 2022 and 24, winning the Republican primary but losing to the Democrat in his Washington district. He voted for George Bush in 2000 and 2004, but became more of a libertarian supporter of Ron Paul. I thought of him in libertarian terms and Ron Paul terms back in the day when I was dabbling in politics. He liked the anti-globalist, anti-establishment message of Donald Trump after Trump's election in 2024. He eventually served as Chief of Staff to Director of National Intelligence Tulsi Gabbard in 2025. In July 2025, he was appointed Director of the Counterterrorism Center, but from the start he had difficulties. I suppose that being on the inside of government exposes one to things that you either accept as part of the team or you become a pain in the butt to those who do accept it. Joe made statements in favor of harsh views of Iran back in that day. He had harsh views such as, if it were up to me, I would just take them out. So something changed over the course of that year in his views. Well, Joe concluded that a foreign government was somehow complicit in the death of Charlie Kirk, and he encouraged Tulsi, his boss, to look into it. When Kash Patel, the director of the FBI, found out that Joe was messing around in that investigation, he took him off the president's daily briefing group and he disappeared. That is, Joe disappeared for a while. He, like Charlie, lobbied the president to resist the advice to go to war with Iran. Whether Joe was correct with the opinions he expressed in his resignation letter or not, it seems now that going to war with Iran was not a very good idea. Why? Well, because you can bomb them, a la Curtis LeMay, back to the Stone Age, and they will just crawl out of the rubble and fire ballistic and drone missiles at the ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz. A ground invasion of Iran is impossible because of the terrain and the size of the place, but I just read where a Marine Expeditionary Force has boarded an LPH in Japan on its way to the Persian Gulf. I spent some time on LPH ships a little over 50 years ago, so I know what those Marines are probably tasked with. The H stands for helicopter. That means the old days of Marines climbing down rope ladders to the landing craft are over. Everything is done by helicopter now. Helicopter insertion, you need air superiority for that. I guess they have air superiority, except for the danger of some Iranian waiting in a spider hole out there in the desert somewhere with a man-portable missile. Reports are that the strait is about 90% closed to international shipping, and it's damaging the world economy severely. The president calls on our former European allies, but most decline, as does NATO. Why? Why would NATO decline to help keep the strait open since they need the oil as much as anyone else? I have a book in my library entitled Statesmen of the Lost Cause. It's about the Southern politicians of the Civil War, of course. But it reminds me of the NATO refusal because those countries view it as a lost cause or a fool's errand. The Europeans apparently view it as a lost cause, but I do not, because I know what the U.S. military can do, especially when things look bad. The Europeans are certainly qualified to speak on lost causes because their entire bureaucracy, known as the EU plus UK, is a lost cause. They celebrate St. Patrick's Day in Dublin, but third world immigration has destroyed the cohesion of the Irish people. What they are really afraid of and what they're really angry about is that Donald Trump refuses to bend his knee to their global government run by unelected bureaucrats in Brussels. However, folks, once again, it seems that Ron Paul has been proven to have been correct in his warnings about Iran. Quote, "This is surely one of the worst military disasters in U.S. history. There are no military opinions available beyond the unthinkable. The use of nuclear weapons, the only viable option that remains, is one that was often urged in the Vietnam War. Just get out now, no return to U.S. bases, no security guarantees to Gulf states in the U.S. empire in the Middle East and elsewhere. If not, it's only going to get worse," end quote. Well, amen, Dr. Paul, but now let's take a look at what Joe said in his letter of resignation. I won't quote the entire letter, but I will just give you the paragraphs that have upset so many in the war/uniparty. Quote, "I cannot in good conscience support the ongoing war in Iran. Iran posed no imminent threat to our nation, and it is clear that we started this war due to pressure from Israel and its powerful American lobby," end quote. To counter that statement, the administration relies on Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, who said his Israel pressure accusation was a false narrative started by Democrats and the liberal media. Quote, "As President Trump has clearly and explicitly stated, he had strong and compelling evidence that Iran was going to attack the U.S. first," end quote. Yes, Caroline, we heard that. We heard that explanation clearly from Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who told us that if Israel attacked first, Iran would attack the U.S. interest. And we knew Israel was going to attack. I would call your statement more in the nature of an admission than true proof of Joe's lie. From Joe's letter, quote, "Early in this administration, high-ranking Israeli officials and influential members of the American media deployed a misinformation campaign that wholly undermined your America First platform and sowed pro-war sentiments to encourage a war with Iran. This echo chamber was used to deceive you into believing that Iran posed an imminent threat to the United States and that you should strike now. There is a clear path to a swift victory. This was a lie, and is the same tactic the Israelis used to draw us into the disastrous Iraq war that cost our nation the lives of thousands of our best men and women. We cannot make this mistake again," end quote. Well, Caroline responded by giving us a long list of threatening things Iran did and said before the attack started. Excuse me, folks. I say in response that Iran did not have 2 carrier battle groups deployed against the United States. It did not have strategic bombers such as the stealth bombers and the old but reliable B-52s. The toothpaste is out of the tube, folks. It's out of the tube, and now things are being said that cannot be unsaid. This statement by a counterterrorism official is an open challenge to U.S. war justification, and it has brought down on Joe's head the kind of attacks one might expect if you are critical of Israel or of U.S. military efforts on Israel's behalf. That makes you anti-Semitic in today's media world. The last report I saw about Joe was that he is currently being investigated for being a Nazi. That's right, a Nazi. Joe Kent a 20-year military veteran of U.S. Special Forces, as he puts it, a Gold Star husband. His wife, Shannon, a Navy cryptologist, killed in Syria by a suicide bomber in 2019. Everything he said in his letter seems true to me. I'm certainly no insider, but it looks obvious in the absence of conflicting evidence that his portrayal of the situation is accurate. Still, it seems irresponsible to write and publicize such a letter. I wonder if he could have gone to his superiors in private instead of this public letter while his country has troops in harm's way. Oh, but he said he did. He said he did do that by going to Tulsi and to Vice President J.D. Vance, both of whom apparently agree with him. Perhaps that is why they seem to have been sidelined, while Marco Rubio, who is Secretary of State, not National Security Director, not Vice President, always seems to be out front. He told them he was going to resign, but I don't know if he told them he would make it public. I'm guessing, but my guess is that he got nowhere by making his views to those above him in private, so he decided to go public. In conclusion, folks, his letter seems very close to giving aid and comfort to the enemy while his country is at war. This is a very difficult decision. I'm sure he gave a lot of thought to. Those of you old enough to remember Vietnam might remember the same controversy with the Pentagon Papers, but this letter is far worse because it is an accusation of massive death by mistaken deception. Another phrase I remember from Vietnam is, "My country, right or wrong." Apparently, Joe couldn't take it anymore. He had to let us know. Joe's letter could have devastating effects on the midterms as well as on 2028. Could it be just raw political positioning, i.e., those on record as opposing the war will win, those who supported it will lose? I suppose that's possible, but time will tell. Finally, folks, goodbye, Joe. You got to go because the truth cannot live in government today. One could extrapolate what Joe said, and if one's conclusion is that he was accurate in his letter, it calls up thoughts that might go as far as mass murder, but we certainly don't want to go there with our own government, do we? At least that's the way I see it. Until next time, folks, this is Darrell Castle. Thanks for listening.